Hi, this week we're actually going to be focusing and talking about motivation. So we're going to begin to look at that right now. So what is motivation? Motivation most often is the term used to explain people's behavior. Successful athletes are said to be highly motivated. A student who avoids work is said to be unmotivated. Motivation is the individual internal process that energizes, directs, and sustains behavior. It's a personal force that causes one to behave in a particular way. Morale is the employee's feeling towards a job, superiors, and the firm itself. High morale results from mainly the satisfaction of one's needs on the job or as a result of the job, and leads to dedication, loyalty, and desire to do a job well. Low morale can actually lead to shoddy work, absenteeism, and high rates of turnover. So we're going to look a little bit about how behavior is explained in an organization. There's a lot of theories coming up here. I'm going to try to go through them as briefly as possible. The first one is scientific management. So towards the end of the 19th century, Frederick W. Taylor became interested in improving the efficiency of individual workers. His interest stemmed from his own experience in manufacturing plants. His research eventually led to scientific management, the application of scientific principles to management of work and workers. So one of Taylor's first jobs was with the steel company. And while he was there, he developed a strong distaste for waste and inefficiency. He observed a practice dubbed soldiering, in which workers worked slowly because they feared that if they worked faster, they would run out of work and lose their job. When he left that steel company, he spent several years at a different steel company. And while he was there, he made his most significant contribution. In particular, he suggested that each job should be broken down into separate tasks, and then management should determine the best way to perform these tasks. Determine the job output to expect when the tasks were performed properly. Choose the best person for each job and train that person to do the job properly. And also to monitor workers to ensure that all jobs were performed as planned. Taylor developed the idea that most people work to earn only money. He reasoned that pay should be tied directly to output. The more a person produces, the more he or she should get paid. This concept gave rise to the piece rate system, under which employees were paid a certain amount for each unit of output that they produced. Under Taylor's piece rate system, each employee is assigned an output quota. If they exceed the quota, they receive a higher per rate unit for all the work produced. You can see figure 10.1 in the text for this. Taylor's system was put into practice at Bethlehem Steel, and the results were dramatic. Taylor's revolutionary ideas had a profound impact on management practice. However, his view of motivation was overly simplistic and very narrow. People work for a variety of reasons other than pay, and therefore simply increasing a person's pay may not increase that person's motivation or productivity. So then we get to the Hawthorne studies. So between 1927 and 1932, two experiments were conducted by Elton Mayo at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company in Chicago. The objectives of these studies are now referred to as the Hawthorne studies. And it was to determine the effects of the work environment on employee productivity. The first set of experiments tested the effect of lighting levels on productivity. One group of workers was subjected to varying lighting, while the second one was not. Productivity actually increased for both groups. For the group whose lighting was varied, productivity remained high until the light was reduced to the level of moonlight. The second set of experiments focused on the effectiveness of the piece rate system in increasing outputs of a group of workers. Researchers suspected that the output would increase the faster the workers would put pressure on the slower workers to actually produce more. However, output remained constant, no matter what standard rates that management set. The researchers concluded that human factors were responsible for the results of the two experiments. In the lighting experiment, the researchers had given both groups of workers a sense of involvement in their jobs, merely by asking them to participate in the research. the level of life did not matter. In the piece rate experiment, each group of workers informally set the acceptable rate of output for the group. To gain the social acceptance of the group, each worker felt pressure to produce the same rate at the group pace. The Hawthorne studies demonstrated that such human factors are at least as important as pay rates are to motivation. From these and other studies, the human relations movement in management was born. The concept of the hierarchy of needs was advanced by Abraham Maslow, a psychologist. A need is a personal requirement. Maslow assumed that humans are wanting beings who seek to fulfill a variety of needs, which he argued can be arranged from the most basic to the most complex in a sequence known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can see figure 10.2 in your text for this. At the bottom of the period are sociological needs, the things that are required to survive. These needs usually include food, water, clothing, shelter, and sleep. And as you can see, according to my graphic, during the time of coronavirus, they included toilet paper as well. At the next level, you have safety needs. These are the things that we require for physical and emotional security. They may be satisfied through job stability, health insurance, pension plans, and safe working conditions. Next are the social needs, the human requirements for love and affection and a sense of belonging. These needs are fulfilled in the workplace, through the work environment, and the informal organization and outside of the workplace by family and friends. Esteem needs include the need for respect and recognition, as well as a sense of accomplishment and worth. These needs may be satisfied through personal accomplishment, promotion to positions with greater responsibility, various honors and awards, and other forms of recognition. At the uppermost level is self-actualization needs, the needs to grow and develop as people and to become all that we are capable of being. These are the most difficult needs to satisfy, and the means of satisfying them tend to vary with every different individual. So Maslow suggested that people work their way up the hierarchy, satisfying their physiological needs before their safety needs, for example. However, needs at one level do not have to be completely satisfied before needs at the next higher level come into play. People can also move up and down the hierarchy. For example, if a person loses their job, he may find himself trying to satisfy safety needs when he only just recently focused on social needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs provides a useful way of viewing employees' motivation. American businesses have largely been able to satisfy workers' basic needs, but the higher order needs present more of a problem for American companies. So now we're going to look at Herzberg's motivation hygiene theory. So Frederick Herzberg interviewed approximately 200 accountants and engineers in Pittsburgh. He asked them to think of a time when they had felt especially good about their jobs and their work, and to describe a factor or factors that caused them to feel that way. Next, he asked them about a time where they felt especially bad about their work. He was surprised to find that the feeling good and the feeling bad resulted from entirely different factors. So that leads us to satisfaction and dissatisfaction. So Herzberg's interviews convinced him that satisfaction and dissatisfaction are different dimensions altogether. The idea that satisfaction and dissatisfaction are separate and distinct dimensions is referred to as the motivation hygiene theory. The job factors that Herzberg found most frequently associated with satisfaction are achievement, recognition, responsibility, advancement, growth, and the work itself. These factors are generally referred to as motivation factors because their presence increases motivation. However, their absence does not necessarily result in dissatisfaction. When motivators are present, they act as satisfiers. Dissatisfaction is caused by job factors such as supervision, working conditions, interpersonal relationships, pay, job security, company policies, and administration. These hygiene factors reduce dissatisfaction when they are present to an acceptable degree. However, they do not necessarily result in higher levels of motivation. Herzberg provides explicit guidelines for using the motivation hygiene theory of employee motivation. He suggests that the hygiene factors must be present to ensure that a worker can function comfortably, but he warns that a state of no dissatisfaction cannot exist. Managers should utilize the hygiene factors to make the work environment as positive as possible, but should then expect only short-term improvements in motivation. Managers must focus instead on providing these satisfiers that will enhance motivation and long-term effect. Employee pay has proven to have more effect than is explained by Herzberg's theory. He suggests that pay provides only short-term motivation, yet in many organizations, pay is a form of recognition and reward for achievement, and recognition and achievement are both motivation factors. The concepts of Theory X and Theory Y were advanced by Douglas McGregor in his book, The Human Side of Enterprise. They represent opposing sets of assumptions that underlie management's attitudes and beliefs regarding worker behavior. Theory X is a concept of employee motivation generally consistent with Taylor's scientific management. Theory X is based on the following assumptions: that people dislike work and try to avoid it. Because people dislike work, managers must coerce, control, and frequently threaten employees to achieve the organizational goals. People generally must be led because they have little ambition and will not seek responsibility. They are concerned mainly with security. Theory Y is a concept of employee motivation, generally consistent with the ideas of the human relations movement. Theory Y is based on the following assumptions. People do not naturally dislike work. In fact, work is an important part of all of our lives. People will work towards goals in which they are committed to. People become committed to goals when it is clear that accomplishing the goal will bring personal rewards. People often seek out and willingly accept responsibility. Employees have the ability to help accomplish organizational goals. Organizations generally do not make full use of their human resources. McGregor argued that most managers behave in accordance with Theory X, but he maintained that Theory Y is more appropriate and effective as a guide for managerial action. Okay, now we're going to talk about reinforcement theory. And this is based on the premise that people will repeat behavior that is rewarded and cease behavior that is punished. A reinforcement is an action that follows directly from a particular behavior. Reinforcements can take a variety of forms and can be used in a number of different ways. A positive reinforcement strengthens the desired behavior by providing a reward. A negative reinforcement strengthens the desired behavior by eliminating an undesirable task or situation. Punishment is often the consequence of an undesirable behavior. Managers who rely on instinct hope to eliminate undesirable behavior by not responding to it. So think about how your behaviors are rewarded in your workplace. Are people rewarded for doing good, or do you work in a work environment where people are able to get by with the minimum and still are rewarded? That's going to have a huge effect on your organization's culture. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the equity theory. So the equity theory of motivation is based on the premise that people are motivated to obtain and preserve equitable treatment for themselves. Equity refers to the distribution of rewards in direct proportion to the contribution of each employee in the organization. Everyone need not receive the same rewards, but the rewards should be in accordance with the individual contributions. According to this theory, we have conceived the idea of equity as follows. First, we develop an input to output ratio. Inputs are the things that we contribute to the organization, and outputs are the things that we get from the organization. Next, we compare this ratio to what we perceive as the input to outcome ratio for some other person, called a comparison offer. If the two ratios are roughly the same, we feel that the organization is treating us equitably, and we are motivated to leave things as they are. If our ratio is higher of the two, we feel under-rewarded and are motivated to change things. We may decrease our own inputs by not working so hard, try to increase our outputs by asking for a raise, try to get the comparison other to increase some inputs or receive decreased outputs, leave the work situation, or do a new comparison with a different comparison offer. Equity theory is most relevant to pay as an outcome. Expectancy theory was developed by Victor Vroom and is a very complex model of motivation, and it's based on a simple assumption that motivation depends on how much we want something and how likely we are to get it. So consider 3 sales representatives who are all candidates for a promotion to one salesman's job. Bill has had a very good sales year, and he always gets positive performance evaluations. However, he isn't sure he wants the job because it requires travel, long working hours, and stress and pressure. Paul wants the job so badly, but he does not think he has a chance of getting it. He has had a terrible sales year and gets only mediocre performance evaluations from his present boss. Susan wants the job as much as Paul, and she thinks she's got a pretty good shot. Her sales have improved this past year, and her evaluations are the best in the company. Expectancy theory would predict that Bill and Paul are not very motivated to seek the promotion. Susan is motivated to seek the promotion because she wants it and she thinks she can get it. Expectancy theory is complex because each action we take is likely to lead to several outcomes, some of which we want and others we don't. For example, a person who works hard and puts in many extra hours may get a pay raise, be promoted, and gain valuable new skills. However, that person also may be forced to spend less time with his or her family and cut back on social activities. Expectancy theory is difficult to apply, but it does provide several useful guidelines for managers. It suggests that managers must recognize the following: that employees work for a variety of reasons, that these reasons or expected outcomes may change over time, and that it's necessary to show employees how they can obtain the outcomes they desire. The goal-setting theory states that employees are motivated to achieve goals that they establish together with managers. Rewards should be tied directly to goal achievement, and using the goal-setting theory, a manager can design rewards that fit employees' needs, clarify expectations, maintain equity, and provide positive reinforcement. I'm going to stop this particular video right here, and we'll pick up with the second video on key motivation techniques.